Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter for the Monday Morning Quarterback, also works NBC Sports Boston, who joins us on the program. Albert, what's the state of the draft right now?
Dan, I think almost every team's expecting they're going to have to do it from home. There's a memo that went out last week that basically said that there's going to be one of two things that are going to happen. Either everybody's going to be able to use their team facility, or no one's going to be able to congregate at all, and everybody's going to have to do the draft from home. And I don't know if you've seen these maps, but, the latest map I saw showed that 31 of the 32 teams are under stay-at-home orders now. And so it's really hard to envision a scenario where all 32 teams are going to be allowed by the rules in their state to go into their facilities. So they're going to almost certainly be running the draft from home, and there are a lot of pitfalls that the league and the teams are working through. I mean, it goes all the way down to the internet connection in your house, which I like. Teams and running their meetings now, which all that stuff's happening from home now. Teams are having problems with that. So there's a lot of work to do in the next 2.5 weeks.
I've been mentioning this morning, the last hour and a half, periodically, that a source said there's some internal pressure that, depending what happens over the next 7 to 10 days in our country, that, it might be wise to postpone this until the middle of May. Like, what's the harm in doing something like that? Have you heard anything where they would postpone it a couple of weeks, which, might allow teams to have a war room where they can go into? We don't even know where the commissioner is going to be. Is the commissioner going to handle the draft from his house?
I mean, and that's what's been floated out there. I know, the two kind of ideas that they'd been working with. One was the commissioner was going to run the draft from his house. Then the other was that they were going to run the draft out of Bristol, out of ESPN's headquarters, and have simulcast there. And so it could be one, it could be the other, it could be both. But there's definitely, I'll put it this way, there are a lot of general managers and a lot of head coaches that feel right now like everybody's going to be put in a really tough spot if the draft goes off on time. And that's without even getting to their own feelings on how tone deaf it might seem to be doing this as this situation worsens in our country. And so, I know a lot of the general managers who are on this subcommittee have pushed back on the idea of going with the draft on time. And I think that the big pushback on that was, well, what difference does it make? It won't be any different in May or June. And now you can sort of see that swinging back around where, some people are saying, well, what's the rush then? Because teams aren't going to be starting up until July anyway. I mean, the off-season program in all likelihood is going to be wiped out. So, if the rookies aren't going to be showing up till the middle of the summer anyway, then why are we in this huge rush to do this while the situation gets so much worse in our country?
I also brought this up. There's a roller coaster. You can see this every year with the draft, certainly with quarterbacks. Jordan Love got all that attention, and then all of a sudden we start to tear him down. Justin Herbert got all that attention. Then we started to nitpick a little bit. Now it's Tua on the clock, and it feels like now people start to slice and dice Tua Tagovailoa and we're not talking about the injuries, but I saw this on Bleacher Report with Matt Miller, and he was talking about, scouts were looking at some of the problems with Tua. It happens every year, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I still think, Dan, the biggest problem with Tua is the medical. And I don't think I think a lot of people are focused on the hip, and that's still an issue, no question. And he's not going to be totally out of the woods on draft day. There's still some complications that could come up with the hip after that. But really, it's the multitude of injuries that teams are worried about. Those two ankle surgeries that he had at Alabama, those are new surgeries. So there's really no track record on how those are going to hold up long term. And then you've got just the massive amount of injuries. And, look, if you want to go back and look at history, Dan, and people look at these injuries and say, well, it's bad luck. The kid could overcome it. History shows us over the last decade that quarterbacks who go in the first round and come into the draft with serious medical history from college almost all get hurt again. Sam Bradford in 10, Jake Locker in 11, Robert Griffin in 12, Marcus Mariota in 15, Carson Wentz in 16, Deshaun Watson in 17, Josh Rosen in 18. All of them had significant injury history in college. All of them got hurt again in the pros. And so teams look at that and say, we like Tua as a player, but can we trust that he's going to be able to stay healthy? And I got to tell you, look at that list, Dan.
Yeah.
Tua's got more history than most of those guys, too. So I still think the medical is a part of it. He's not a perfect prospect, but I can tell you this. The Bama coaches have told NFL people, we believe he's a left-handed Drew Brees. I've got enough NFL people agree with that assessment to make me think that he's very well thought of as a player. Really the major problem is the medical.
What are the Dolphins going to do? What should and what will the Dolphins do?
Well, I think they'd love to get Joe Burrow, but I don't think it's going to happen. The Bengals have done a lot of relationship building, I'll put it that way, with Joe Burrow. They've got a guy on their team named Sam Hubbard, who was actually a college roommate of Joe Burrow's. Zach Taylor actually had a little bit of a relationship with Joe Burrow's dad, for them having recruited the same area a few years ago when Zach Taylor was at the University of Cincinnati. And so I don't think the Bengals are going to move off their spot on this one. So that leaves the Dolphins sitting there at 5, and they did a ton of homework on Tua. I mean, look, the owner, the team president, the GM, they were all at Tua's bowl game, and Tua didn't even play. So that's the amount of research and homework they've done into Tua. But that can also swing the other way, where maybe now they know enough about the medical to feel uncomfortable with it. And so I still think they probably take a quarterback. Do they move to get one? I'm not sure. And I'm telling you, if they had the choice of the two, I'm not so sure it would be Tua over Justin Herbert right now.
Really?
I'm not positive on that, yeah.
Okay. We're talking to Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter for the MondayMorningQuarterback.com. You start to look at landing spots for Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, even Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, it feels like Clowney is going to get paid and he's going to have opportunities here. But let's start with Cam. The market is shrinking rapidly.
Yeah, and this is like the weirdest circumstance, isn't it? Because forever people were looking for quarterbacks and overpaying quarterbacks, overdrafting quarterbacks. Now it's almost like that bubble burst where, the supply actually outweighed the demand this offseason. And that, left Cam and Andy Dalton and Jameis without a seat when the music stopped. So I think part of Cam's problem is absolutely the medical and the circumstance that all teams and players are in right now, where you can't give guys physicals, and teams want to get a look at his right shoulder, and teams want to get a look at his left foot, and they can't do that right now. And so that part of it's a big piece of all of this. And then the other piece of it is, I mean, look, Cam's been the centerpiece of every team he's been on for the last 10 years. How would he fit in if he was a little less than that, if he was not that, And so that's a question that I think teams have to sort through with him too. So, my personal feeling is right now he might be, and this sounds crazy, but he may be forced to go somewhere on a 1-year deal to try and rehabilitate his stock a little bit. And, the Chargers seem happy with Tyrod, but if they strike out on getting a quarterback in the draft, maybe they revisit it. New England, if his price came way down, they've got cap issues. Those are the two. It's hard to find him a home right now because there's no place that can bring him in and say to him, Cam, you're our starting quarterback from day one.
What about Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton?
Yeah, so Jameis to me is the one that, I look at him and it would make sense for him to go kind of the Teddy Bridgewater route, where Teddy, and obviously the circumstances were a little different, but Teddy was coming off the injury and sort of had to reestablish himself as a player and went to a really stable organization with good coaching and benefited from having been in New Orleans for 2 years. So could Jameis do that in, say, a place like a Pittsburgh or a Seattle? Or even in New Orleans, could he go to a place that's got an established starter, good coaching, where he can kind of rehabilitate himself, just from a perception standpoint for a year? I think that's probably what winds up happening with him. And I had Andy Dalton pegged for the Jaguars just because Jay Gruden's there and they've got a close relationship. And I thought at some point, that would make some sense as a Gardner Minshew insurance policy. But I was told over the last couple of days that the Jags haven't shown a ton of interest in that yet. Now, maybe they will post-draft, but the Jaguars haven't shown a ton of interest in that yet. But I think Dalton will have to find that sort of situation where, sort of like Ryan Tannehill last year, maybe you go to a place where the starter's on shaky ground, you go and you're the good soldier backup, and then if something goes wrong, you step in.
Patriots cutting Cody Kessler means what?
It means that I think it means they probably draft one, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be that high, but I think they're of a mindset right now to start throwing darts at that dartboard. They really like Jarrett Stidham, and if you break down the trajectory of Jarrett Stidham, it actually makes some sense that he could be seen as a franchise type guy who's the number one high school quarterback in the country coming out. Had tough circumstances at Baylor, played in an offense that didn't fit him at Auburn. The Patriots viewed him as a distressed asset, a very talented distressed asset for those reasons when they drafted him last year. And he had a good summer last year. So they like him, but they're not going all in on him yet. So I think sort of like, you remember like how Seattle, when Pete Carroll and John Schneider got there, they just started throwing darts at the dartboard. And it was Charlie Whitehurst, and it was Matt Flynn, and it was Tavares Jackson. Eventually, they landed Russell Wilson. Yeah. I think that's sort of where the Patriots go right now, where they like Stidham, they give him a shot, but they just kind of keep throwing darts at the dartboard.
Good to talk to you, Albert. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time as always.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Stay safe.
All right, good stuff. Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter for the Monday Morning Quarterback.com.